Again from the top. Hey, we got practice now. Easy.
Yes. I'm
Okay,
ready.
so hi, we're back. We have panel going on now. Initially, Dalton was scheduled to be on the panel at 7 p.m.
Mhm.
However, we thought about how his story is a little bit different, so we wanted to go through that first and then have the panel later. So we're gonna see some similar questions and some different things. So first, Dalton, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dalton McGee. I am the director of esports for Springfield Public Schools here in Springfield, Illinois, home of the Capitals. I teach science at Lanphier High School, specifically freshman biology and honors anatomy for upperclassmen. And then I am a former NASIF Scholastic Fellow. I'm former head coach of esports at Lincoln Land Community College. I am the chief competition officer for the Illinois High School Esports Association. So, moral of the story is my boyfriend does not see me as often as he wants, but it's fun to play video games and teach science for a living. I can't complain.
Yeah. And then Dalton and I actually met through the IHSCA, which are one of the
Yep.
wonderful sponsors of this whole thing. And IHSCA for us, sorry, for those who don't know, is the Illinois High School Esports Association. You and I met, what, 2018?
Yeah, because I was student teaching in the fall of 18, so it would have been
Yeah.
probably the spring of 19 that I really would have come around to the IHSCA. Yeah, because that was when the Overwatch finals were
Yeah.
that I first showed up at.
Yeah. And so Dalton and I have crossed paths a lot because we both run the IHSCA together. He is Chief Competition Officer. Formerly, he and I TO'd, casted, produced, coached, whatever,
Name
together.
it.
We've hosted events together several times. We hosted events in my facility several times. You played in my state finals the first year at Glenwood,
Yeah.
Rocket League.
And that is sort of how our like friendship kind of developed. Is originally we were rivals, like bitter rivals, because Springfield and Glenwood in every sport for all of history have
Oh
just
yeah.
been bitter
Oh yeah.
rivals. And then when we were the two powerhouses in the CS8, our conference for esports, it was awesome to have that rivalry even there in gaming. And then when you moved on, we still got to keep you involved with the Capitals, going to Wesleyan and seeing them sit in Naperville North there for that lane event we
Yeah,
had.
that LAN event was
Uh,
awesome.
it was very cool, and now we are, like you said, kind of running stuff and trying to keep Andy Mendez from going crazy, basically.
And for reference, just for now, just like you're talking about, your new title is Chief Competition Officer. My new title is Intern Wrangler, but also Head Moderator.
Apparently,
Yeah, so I'm
yeah, it
wrangling all the interns and also Head Moderator and kind of running that whole deal.
doesn't really have the same ring as Chief of Crew, but Lead Frog is now no longer with us, so
Yes.
there's that.
Intern Wrangler sounds more like my kind of style anyway. So, um, so it's something I've actually been thinking about a lot, and you're probably gonna be able to comment on this. Is a lot of times when I'm doing all this advocacy work and everything like that, my thought really is I don't know if I'm quite qualified to do it because I am new to the LGBTQ community more or less. I was a huge ally and whatnot, but I came out in October. And so you've been living this life for much longer, and your story is much more depth than mine does, and I do want to give you space to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, where do you want to start with that necessarily?
Well, I want to preface by saying something I think is really important before any story gets told, any coming out story, any sharing of what happened or vulnerabilities. And you sort of touched on it accidentally, and that's this apology that happens before someone shares. And what I mean by that is, you say, you're new to the community, and it's not as in depth a story, but I will push back on that because in the same way that you might not have the context on what it's like to be gay and like be a gay man in a small town, I have no idea what it's like to be trans. And so I think it's important to recognize that everyone has their own unique angle and everyone is affected by different challenges differently. And it's hard for me to hear someone say, oh, my stuff's not as bad as that. Well, no, it is, because that was your experience. And maybe I would have handled things better or worse based on my experience. So I do want to preface, talking about what happened and why it's got me to where I am now by saying that it's no better or worse than anyone. It's just a different story. And I think when we're willing to give visibility to our stories, that's what's important. That's when people are able to hear something that they resonate with and find strength from that. And that's why I said yes to talking about this tonight, because I think it's just important to get that visibility and certainly show the different corners of the community, because there's a place for everybody. So
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to start by saying that.
Yeah. And I mean, so my story is different because even in the trans community, I have gone really fast. And whenever I tell my story, a lot of other trans folks are like, holy crap, you went that fast? I'm like, me, yeah, it worked for me. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the emphasis you're bringing on that is that everyone's story is their own, and pace isn't necessarily an indicator, or how things went down is not always the same.
Right. And I
So
think that's true too of, coming out. Like if we're going to start heading towards, saying what happened, I came out when I was 16, and some people, particularly of like my parents' generation, are still not out, and it's just because that's not something they did. And 16 sounds crazy. And then I see, my students that are coming into high school that have been out since they were like in sixth grade. Like they just always it wasn't even a needing
yeah,
to come out thing. It was just, yeah, I just am. And
one of the students
um,
I mentor, not gonna say her name, she's over in up north. She's been out as trans since she was 14.
right.
She's hormones.
And so, like you said, the timing is never indicative of right or wrong. Everyone is different, and so I did want to preface, our conversation tonight and all the panels that we're going to hear by saying that, like, understand that don't feel guilty because of somebody else's story. Feel empowered by what resonates with you. Feel heard by someone else having a shared experience. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So I guess getting into it, earlier in the day I shared my story, but for a brief recap of those who weren't here, I came out as trans in October of 2021. I kind of figured it out in September, came out in October, started hormones in November. I am now on month 7 of that, which is going wonderfully. And I have kind of turned into this big advocate sort of person because of the way that I always seen my experience compared to others. I want to help others have an experience that could be easier. And so I'm a lot of advocacy and just helping people out like that. My story is, at this point, fairly straightforward, but it is still worth mentioning. But I do want to get into Dalton's story because his is much different and his experience is really valuable to share.
Yeah. So, important context, I guess, to start is that I was raised as a member of Jehovah's Witnesses. And some of you will immediately, that light will go on and you'll know where I'm heading with this. Some of you are not as familiar with that religion, but Jehovah's Witnesses are a Christian denomination that is very known for being very literal in terms of their interpretation of the Bible. Things such as believing that only 144,000 people will go to heaven, and taking the Bible's words as they are, no room for interpretation. It is what it is. And so clearly we are familiar with the scriptures in the Bible that are going to lead to my story. It's a different conversation about whether or not those are accurate translations. We can maybe save that for another part of the stream.
Yeah.
But I was definitely raised in a very, very conservative Christian household. And I was raised primarily in a town called Riverton here next to Springfield, about 3,000 people in a graduating class of about 100. And as far back as I can remember, I just was attracted to guys. And it was just walk around crushing on people at school. It's him, it's not her.
Yeah.
And the problem was when I was a 10, I think my brother was 9, 8, maybe 8, depending on the month it was. We got baptized, and Jehovah's Witnesses care very, very much about baptism being a choice that you then have committed to for your life. It's not like a at birth type thing. People study, tell the elders of the congregation they want to get baptized. They go through a process of learning and showing, like demonstrating that they're sincere and that they know enough, and then they do it. And my brother said he wanted to do it. And I said, okay, well, I can't be one-upped by my brother. So I started the process too. And it took years for me to realize that I didn't want to do that process. And it was just me being competitive. Now, that may surprise you to hear that I was competitive about something. But I just did it because my little brother was going to do it, and I couldn't be one up by him. And even then, I knew I didn't really have enough context to know what gay meant, but I knew that I definitely liked guys. And so I got baptized, and that ended up being something that I was committed to, stuck with in a sense. It got real bad as high school really picked up, because I was very aware of the teachings of the church, and I knew where it was going, because Jehovah's Witnesses do this practice called disfellowshipping. And essentially it is when someone has committed a serious sin or wrongdoing, they're kicked out of the congregation, in that nobody that's a Jehovah's Witness is allowed to speak to them at all, worldwide. Like no witnesses in the whole world can talk to them, except for in the case of extreme family emergency, or in the case of elders reaching out to try to see if they want to come back. And they do this as an exclusionary practice that they believe is to preserve the sanctity of the congregation. But in reality, any reasonable, sensible person knows that that's a manipulative tool to make people lose what they have and feel sorry about it and change and go back and conform. And I just didn't. I finally decided, at the encouragement of some of my friends at School of the Triplets, to come out. And it was a Friday at school. I remember.
Well, how old were you at the time?
I was 16. I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
It was September 11th of 2011. I think it was a Friday, because I know it was close to the weekend. Maybe I told them earlier in the week, but in any case, I told people at school, and we were at lunch. And I remember telling the table and being like, "Okay, go tell everybody." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Because I'd rather people at this small school hear it from the people I love and care about than hear it from somebody I don't know. So go tell everybody."
That was actually how I viewed my coming out too. Is like, I knew that I couldn't just come to my students and keep it like at a work thing, because typically people who come out as trans, you keep it at your workplace or a close friend group. I'm like, given how closely tied everything is, I just have to say it.
Yeah, that was definitely the vibe. I was like, go tell everyone. So the triplets and the friend group did. And it was crazy because Riverton High School is basically shaped like a giant Y. And so the cafeteria is at like one of the tops of the forks. And I walked to the bottom of the Y to choir the next hour. And by the time I got there, people that were already in the room before me had heard and were like, "Did you just come out?" And it was crazy. I mean, talk about news traveling fast. But that was kind of like this encouraging thing. I was around people that, definitely the people that kind of snubbed it, small town vibes, but a lot of people that were like proud of you, good job, teachers that were supportive. And I got home and I didn't tell my mom. And I went to my dad's that weekend because I had visitation with him every other week. My parents got divorced when I was like 3. And I have no real conscious memory of what it's like to have married parents. And I pretty much had lost touch with my dad in terms of closeness up until I came out. Like, I went over to his house, but in retrospect, it was very shallow. It was just kind of going there to play video games and get away from my mom and stepdad. And so I went over to his house for visitation that weekend, and I said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And so that Friday evening, after I got to his house, we went on a walk in the neighborhood, and I told him that I came out. And I'll never forget it, because he like paused, and he goes, "Takes a lot of balls to tell your old man that." And I did not know where this was going next. I'm like, "Say something, say something." and he just like, he's like, "Dalton, duh. Ange and I have known. That's my stepmom." And what's important to know is he was never a Jehovah's Witness. My mom, actually, he was my mom's second marriage, and he was never a witness. They got divorced. He thought they were crazy. So he didn't have that baggage in terms of determining how he felt about it. He was just, yeah, whatever. He just, like, almost to the point that he didn't care. Like, he did care, you know what I mean? But like, you didn't care. It was that reaction. And so I spent the rest of the weekend at his house. But before that night ended, I decided to get, bold. And I called my mom on the phone, and I told her. And when I told her that Friday night, I just remember saying it and then silence. And it was like the silence I was hearing from the phone was like the loudest sound she could have made, because it was like earth shattering. I knew it was about to happen. And she just said, "I need to let you go," and hung up. And so that was a lot. And then I ate a lot of candy and ate my feelings and continued to play video games all night. And then that Sunday morning, I got picked up by my stepdad, and I got back to my house, my mom's house, which was about a 20-minute drive back to Riverton. It was in silence. And all of my stuff was in trash bags. And I didn't know how exactly they would react. I knew that I was probably going to get disfellowshipped, but I was a minor. And so I was like, they're just not going to talk to me, and I'm just going to be relegated to my room and do a year and a half of hell, so to speak, until I'm finally 18 and can go to college. But no, my stuff was in trash bags. And they called me into their room and talked to me and said, "Are you sure this is the choice you want to make?" That kind of stuff, which anybody in the LGBT community has heard the word choice in this context plenty. But I said, it's not a choice. I just do like guys.
It's who I am.
And yeah, I was like, it just is what it is. And it was a lot. And I was feeling kind of numb and not really sure how to react to everything happening. But then they made me go into my baby brother's room. So I am the oldest of 3 boys. And Ben is a year and a half younger than me. A lot of people watching probably know Ben, because he's actually one of my assistant coaches now. But Garrett is my half brother. He's my stepdad's son, and he's 8 years younger than me, almost to the day. And Garrett and I were very close. Like, we both fought with Ben. I felt bad for Ben in retrospect, but Garrett and I were like tight. And my mom made me go into his room and tell him that I was choosing this lifestyle and it was more important to me than he was. And that was what they were going to force me to say before they actually kicked me out. And it was a lot. I don't like the trauma has sort of blocked seeing that moment, having memories of it. So all I associate that with is probably the hardest I ever cried, because I couldn't even talk to tell him that. Because obviously it wasn't true. And obviously I did not love him. It was just the situation that was going on. And so then I had to call my dad and say, I need you to turn around. I need this place to stay tonight. And that ended up leading to, staying at his house, hopping around, living with various friends for small periods of time. And the rest of my high school career was finally getting to, have my truth, but bouncing house to house to house, because he didn't really have a bed for me at the time. It wasn't like a room for me. I was just sleeping on the floor in the living room on like a blow up mattress. And I was trying to find a more stable place to be as I finished high school. And then finally I did graduate. I did get a good scholarship and I went to Millikan. And then I had that first stable home life in like 2 years. So, that's essentially, obviously we're going to talk about more and like how that went forward for both of us and how it's going to like contextualize our career and stuff. But that was what happened. And all I can really say and look back on when I think about it is like understanding now the reasons behind things. And so an important point I want to make is a lot of times when people are kicked out of their homes for being gay or for any reason, I mean, other Jehovah's Witnesses, maybe that's not why they were disfellowshipped, they were. It is very normal to resent those people that did that. And it's very normal to feel hurt. Everyone processes things differently, but I'm not there anymore. It's important to understand that people you meet have, like, everyone's sort of the hero of their own story, so to speak, because they only have perspective on what their life experience has been. And while I certainly disagree with my parents' choice to do that, I know why they did it. And they spent their whole life being indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And so what has helped in the coping process to a certain extent is the understanding that it's not that they couldn't have chosen, but it was unreasonable to expect that they didn't do that, because they have been ingrained not to do that. And so it's almost like we're both victims of this circumstance type thing. And that's what works for me. It might not work for everybody. I know, we've talked briefly about certain folks in your life that were not as easy to, get on board with the idea. But at the end of the day, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love myself and who I am and who I'm representing myself as, then it's just easier to go to bed. And the rest isn't going to fix itself overnight. It's not going to fix itself in years in a lot of cases. I mean, I know many witnesses that are, or former witnesses, that still just don't have that resolution. And while it always sucks, and while I would love to be able to text my mom, about things going on in life, it's just not a thing. And so that kind of goes back to that first comment I made before we started, which was everyone's experience is different. People say, like, I'm so sorry to hear about this. And my response without thinking is so frequently, it's fine. But it's not fine. It's just what it is.
And you can't change it, and it's already said and done.
Right. And so I think power in these scenarios is knowing when you don't have power. Like, I can't think of the figure of speech now, but like, wisdom is knowing when you don't have the power to change the scenario and being okay with that. Yeah. And so that's sort of why I wanted to bring that up at first and then kind of loop it back. It's not a worse or better or easier or harder experience. It's just my experience.
Yeah.
And you have one that has given you context I don't have, and so on and so forth. So I'm talking a lot. I'm going to take a drink of this body armor and let you talk now.
I mean, looking at contextualizing a lot of experiences, this is where I feel really weird, and this is a personal side diatribe. I feel really weird about transition is that I've watched transition from the outside for a lot of friends, and so when it happened for me, I wasn't flying blind, and that's contextualized for me because a lot of trans folks do fly blind in it. They're going solo. They don't have a friend group. They don't have supports. They're doing it themselves. And a lot of the students who I mentor who in that regard are friends that I have who are trans. I am their first other trans friend. And so you find community like we're talking about earlier today. Community through labels. Well, this is community through having a mutual label, trans femme, but the experience is always different. And that's what we're talking about is that the label gets you through the door, but the conversations that happen afterwards kind of give you meaning to those relationships and contexts. And when I look at these sort of coming out stories, and we're going to talk to 9 more people today about their coming out story, it is, I think, better, and I did learn something here about talking about the context as not better or worse or easier or harder, but different. And I actually wanted to ask you, you said you don't harbor this huge resentment anymore against them, and it is what it is. Can you explain what that process looked like to get there? Because
it was not, yeah.
Because everyone can talk about like, oh, the stages of grief and whatever, and we have that stuck in our head from cultural memories, but I'm pretty sure it's not that. And so it's looking at like, I'm just curious, what's the process? What was the process like for you to be not only accepting of what's happened, but then just not okay with it, but dealing with it?
So it was not quick.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that while I knew I was gay, and while I knew I was going to get kicked out of my house, I also believed the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, really? Can you put some more information on that then?
So I was a Jehovah's Witness. Like, let's get that clear. I wasn't secretly hiding for 16 years as a non-believer. I was raised the same way they were. And one of the teachings, it talks, 1 Corinthians says, at least that their translation of the Bible said, men who lie with men will not inherit God's kingdom, right? So I thought, well, I was dealt a really crappy hand in this life because I believed what I've been taught my whole life, but I also knew I was gay. So I thought, well, I'm just going to die at Armageddon. But, and I had to live with that for probably throughout the rest of my high school career. I still held that sentiment. They believe that, when Armageddon comes, those who are unfaithful die. If you die before Armageddon, you're resurrected and given a chance to prove your faith. And so I believed all that. And so I thought, man, I really hope I die before Armageddon gets here so I can be resurrected and say sorry and realize that I was wrong. Because if it comes while I'm alive, I'm just dead. And that's a lot. And like, I probably should throw a little bit of a trigger warning up in terms of like conversations about ending one's life. But it was hard for 2 years to feel any point in life because I knew that I was going to die in my head. And it was just not even like a sad or depressed type of thoughts in terms of doing that, but a reckless type of thoughts. It was, unhealthy behaviors. It was being with the wrong types of people. It was doing the wrong types of things because none of it mattered.
I can really relate to that personally, if I can interject, I mean, you've seen me work myself to death for 4 years. There's been a part of me that didn't plan to be here right now. And I had that part of me probably from 16 through like last year. And so it's a statistic, but it's a true statistic at a certain point that I hate, is that 41% of trans folks have attempted suicide. I have not attempted it, but damn if I thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I grew up on a farm. We had acres. We go back. There's a big road. And, on a lighter note, before I get darker again, I mean, we didn't celebrate birthdays. Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate any holidays, including birthdays. But my German Shepherd and I had the same birthday. So I would I would get a cupcake she could eat like a week ahead of time and hide it in my room, and then on our birthday go to the very back of my yard in the creek in the barn back there and share a cupcake with my German Shepherd. And so like that's the like picture, very long narrow yard and a barn at the very back. And I remember the week leading up to my finally coming out, what finally broke me and made me come out was that whole week I went back every single night to the barn and would climb up into the rafters and look down. And like I would consciously be thinking about what could I jump into that would end it the quickest and least painful. And that was every night that week that I was back there. And that's when at least I had some self-awareness of, oh my God, you have to get out of here. And I finally just said, you know what? I might do that still, but I'm going to come out. They're going to know. And that's what put it over the edge for me. It was those thoughts every night. So to the original question, I did still believe the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses for years, 2 years probably, I would say. And it wasn't until I got to college and had this life transition and some sort of sense of new freedom that I was able to step back a little bit and contextualize what had happened. Excuse me. You know, I wrote my mother a letter years later. So this was probably one of the bigger moments where I realized it wasn't her fault, quote unquote. I'm not apologizing for them. It's just sort of talking in this idea of like, why did they do what they did? And I talked to her about Plato's allegory of the cave. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but if you're not, basically it's this idea that there's these people that live in a cave and they're like tied down to a chair facing a wall. And they always hear whispers and they know things are behind them, and then but they never see them. They only ever see this wall. And the only time they see any objects is when people behind them like shine light and make animal figures or trees or like figurines on the wall with shadows. If that is where you grew up, sitting in that chair, seeing those things on the wall, that would be all you knew existed in the universe. And if you saw a tree on the wall, to you, a tree would be a flat, gray, shaped like a tree, but flat, gray object.
Yeah.
So then what happens is somebody that's in those chairs gets out of the cave. And when they first walk out, they're in a lot of pain because they're not used to sun. Like they it's hard on their eyes. They don't know what it feels like on their skin. It's a very uncomfortable removal from the cave. But then they go around and they see, you know, these trees. And they ask somebody, what is that? They say, that's a tree. And they say, no, it's not. Trees are gray.
Because in that mind, that's the truth. That's not like them lying to them. That's not, I was
right.
To believe it. That's their truth.
It's their truth. And it's, how could they possibly know different? And so what happens is this person goes outside of the cave. They see this green tree. They hear these birds. They get these smells. They experience what life actually is outside the context of their bubble. They go back into the cave excited, and they say, guys, trees are green. And what's the response? It's, what's green? There's no ability for someone still in that cave to understand what it's like to not be in that cave. And that was a really powerful, like, understanding for me. And I wrote about that in the letter. And I was like, Mom, please leave the cave. Talk to me. Come have lunch. I'm not even saying leave the congregation. I just want you to see what's actually true in my life.
And this is a conversation you and I had a lot, is that a lot of times we're trying to convert people essentially out of their own belief system. And even if we do say all the right things and say all the right facts and present 10 billion arguments, we got to get past the training of the cave still, essentially. We have to get past their base understanding of how the world is. And that's really hard to unpack.
Yeah, and not to mention, I think to the point of why I was able to move forward is I don't think some people can untrain the cave. Some can. And what Plato talks about is it's actually very rare for someone to be able to untrain the cave, so to speak. Because indoctrination is powerful. Mm-hmm. And when I was able to tell myself, Dalton, they will never leave the cave. And it is not your responsibility to lead them out. If they do, that would be an interesting day. If for some reason something changed in my parents or my baby brother, or any of my family, and they wanted to be a part of my life again, it would be a lot.
And
But it
that's
would also
actually
be welcome.
that's really common in the discourse around LGBTQ people on social media is how many of them try to be that savior of others. How many of them try to convert non-believers essentially in this case. And a lot of them don't see that in the case of like there's people you simply can't change. Or
Yeah.
in a certain regard, if you can, it takes a lot.
Yeah. And it's tough because it's so much more than just not having my immediate family anymore. My whole family were Jehovah's Witnesses.
And I was going
same
to
as
ask
my
about that.
father.
It's like, what network did you lose through that?
Everything. Witnesses do not allow their kids to hang out with non-witnesses outside of school because they think they're going to corrupt them and have worldly influence on them. I didn't have friends like the traditional kid did. I wasn't allowed to participate in activities at school. My social circle was going to the Kingdom Hall, going to church, being with family, being with extended family, and that was it. That's who I knew. And then they were all gone. And what was super messed up is they stick to that not talking thing. My grandma, my mom's mom, got cancer, and I found out that she was terminal 2 days before she died. And when that happened, let's say Angry Wrigley showed up, and I let him have it. I was like, "This is my grandmother. You're allowed to talk when there are emergencies in the family." Yeah. Right. And they didn't. And I let my mom have it. And that funeral was very awkward. I showed up with my boyfriend.
Oh,
I did. I was like, you're going to sip this tea, people. But it wasn't like, let's go and let's like be in their face and be like, not authentic to who we are. It's just, no, you're going to see me and you're going to see success and happiness in face of all this. And recently, I have been told finally that my great grandmother is not doing well and is very, very old, and is finally started to experience symptoms of Alzheimer's. And while it was terrible to know 2 days before my grandma died, it is differently terrible to know that there's time before my great grandmother will, and I don't get to talk to her.
Oh my God.
And she was my hero. I mean, my brother and I escaped to her house. She taught me to love cottage cheese and peaches. She taught me how to make vegetable soup. We would stay up and watch Whose Line Is It Anyway? I saw every episode with her.
Oh my God, really?
I've seen every episode of that show ever aired, even the new ones. And she was like a hero. And I wrote her a letter too. When I wrote my mom that letter, my mom's letter was a single space 12-page Times New Roman 12-point font letter. My grandma's was shorter, but I never got a response from either of them. And I thought maybe it'd be like, Dalton, we can't talk to you. Some courtesy of recognition that they had seen it, but it was nothing. And It was almost harder to part ways with my with my grandmother than my mom, because I felt safe with my grandma, and that was the one that it was the rug out from under me. I did not feel safe around my mom and my stepdad. But it was a very, very abusive home, but not my grandmother. And so the realization that even she will not do this helped me understand that it is a witness thing, not a me thing.
Yeah.
And that was important.
I'm assuming that helped you kind of get not past, but further down the idea that you need to get beyond this.
And there's a lot of lingering problems. Former witnesses have extremely high rates of drug usage, alcoholism, thoughts of wanting to end their life. And it's because when you're a witness, you're told constantly that if you leave the congregation and go into the world, those types of things will happen to you.
Yeah.
And so they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Yeah. And it's not because you're gay. It's not because you're not a witness. It's because you've been indoctrinated to think that's what happens in the world.
Exactly.
And that's not what the world is. The world is opportunity and love, and you have to contribute those things to it, not what they tell you. That's how you beat them. You don't beat them by converting them. You don't beat them by winning the argument. You beat them by being the example of everything they think can't happen. Yeah. And that's where we go to like career now, right?
And actually, I did want to follow up and go into the career path because I've been dealing with this, and I do want to kind of give you a sec to breathe, because I want to talk about how has your identity affected your career. Because for me, once again, coming out back in October, I still have people on campus dead naming me on purpose. I have faculty and staff doing it. Like, my company credit card is still my dead name. My business cards I had to fight to get changed. My nameplate at my door took 6 months. A slip of paper took 6 months because they forgot. And while it's not negatively impacted my employment, many people I know it has. Many, many people I know being trans has affected their employment. And I feel really lucky that I can be in a context where things aren't as dire, where I can still keep my employment. But that shouldn't be what I'm hoping for. I shouldn't hope to keep my job by being myself. I shouldn't have to hope for basic human decency. Literally, between panels, I had to call campus safety to get some doors unlocked. I got called sir 6 times. I counted too. And this person knows me. I've talked with this officer at least 5 times in person. I've worn a dress literally all 5 times. And so this sort of negative backlash has been hard for me. I had the thought cross my mind recently, I probably can't go back to teaching, at least at Glenwood, nearly as easily. Like the burbs, yeah, maybe. But
there's the T.
Yeah.
and in the interest of my love for my district, I won't speak to Glenwood, but I will speak to Springfield. And I think that it's really important to work for an organization that reflects your values.
Also,
in any case,
context for everyone else here, Dalton and I worked at schools that were like 5 miles apart.
Mm-hmm.
Springfield,
they're real close,
and Glenwood was like the next district over. So our schools saw each other a lot, and our district policies actually influenced by each other. Like Glenwood wouldn't call a snow day until Springfield called a snow day. So that kind of thing. So continue.
And at the same time, they're very different in terms of the makeup of people.
Oh, Glenwood, I've done the stats. It's 85% white, and there is literally a trailer park next to the police station, and a lot of kids come from the cornfields.
Yeah, I won't touch on Glenwood. I don't have the experience of Glenwood. Any opinion I have of Glenwood would come from just playing sports against them, and I can't speak to the Titans. I know there's plenty of good people in Glenwood.
There is.
But what I know is District 186 has created, that's Springfield, for those maybe that aren't familiar. I'm so used to just saying 186. Excuse me. They have created an environment where I feel welcome. And not just welcome, but empowered and celebrated. I was the only openly gay male teacher at Lanphier when I first got hired there, as far as I was aware. I'm not anymore. Awesome. But that, like, I have always felt like I could be myself. And I think that's important because visibility does matter. Maybe in more intangible ways than tangible ways. But when a kid has a teacher that is gay and an example of not doing things that are self-destructive, not hearing if you're gay, this will happen. If you're gay, this will happen. But instead seeing successful, loving life, happy relationship, coaching. I think that the most powerful thing we can do for our kids is to just authentically be us and be us well, because then they can see if I'm struggling, I can still do something I want to do, whether it's teaching or not. Like I can become that, and you can't tell me I can't.
Yeah.
And that's the power that you give kids. And
like with my kids, and I talk about my kids a lot, from IHSA, from Glenwood, from other schools around the nation, I'm pretty authentic with them. I will be honest, like, hey guys, I'm struggling. Can I get some time? I'll be pretty honest, like, hey, I'm doing great, and such is going on, and these kind of things. But like you said, showing that authenticity and being genuine matters a lot more than putting on a face of like, everything's happy and I'm fine. Because you don't want to get the impression of the students that everything is easy and perfect.
Yeah, I remember the last day of this last Overwatch season for us, we had a conversation, and I with the team, and I said, listen, it's okay to be upset. I'm not in a great place right now. And that is because something just happened that I don't like. We lost. And understanding that it's okay to have negative feelings, but then what do you do next is the story.
And a lot we do as educators and mentors is modeling. Modeling, whether we want it to be some big grandiose thing or just the little interactions.
So how does what happened contextualize career? It's the same thing on a micro scale, right? I don't have the type of trauma happen at work that I had happen then. But what you can do in the big things, you'll always do in the small things. And if I was to try to say, oh, I'm over it, I'm fine, what it is what it is, and that kind of vibe, you aren't being authentic and you aren't being truthful. And only with truthful authenticity will people learn that it's okay to have those challenges. What's next? Flip the page. What's tomorrow? And that is where you find strength, and that's where you find the ability to not be stopped by anything. Period.
Yeah.
And so that's the brand. That's what I try to tell myself every day. It's not always easy. There are days, like I mentioned earlier, that like things happen and I just want to call my mom and tell her about it. And I was a big mama's boy, and I can't, and that sucks. But also it's knowing that you do have people. I don't know a single person in the community, the LGBT community, that doesn't have someone.
Exactly.
Right. And if they don't, DM me on Discord.
Same.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so we have a community. Is it what we want it to be? Maybe it's not what you thought you wanted it to be. Maybe you did think you needed that traditional immediate family, and that matters a lot to you, and it does matter a lot to people. Maybe you thought you needed 30 friends. Anytime you can Snapchat them and say, hey, let's go out, and they say yes. What you need is what brings you joy, not a specific thing.
Yeah.
And so it's exploring yourself, it's exploring the people around you. Not to RuPaul it, but like, it's like if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love somebody else? And I try to really live that, because it's that self-acceptance is what got me through it's not me, it's the witnesses. And it's the understanding of indoctrination that got me through. I won't say that I won't apologize for them, but I understand why they did it. And once that stuff is off your shoulders, you're free to like chase your joy, live your life. And so how does it contextualize teaching? How does it contextualize coaching? What you're teaching them is perseverance. You're teaching them emotional maturity, the like being able to step back and like let logic guide decision making, but let feelings contextualize that logic, not control it.
Yeah, and that's the biggest challenge with a lot of students is they try to say like, I shouldn't be having feelings at all. No, stop it. Stop saying shouldn't.
Yeah.
You are allowed and in fact encouraged to have feelings, but they should be contributors to what you're doing, not the only thing that contributes to what you're doing.
Right. I've been called like Vulcan by more people than I could tell you, because I definitely present more no feelings.
The thing is, I know you well enough to know there's a lot going on in your head.
Yes. But I think that's another thing that is worth talking about. I know we're coming up on our panel time soonish.
Oh, we have plenty of time. We can go another 10 minutes.
But like, there's definitely lingering effects. And, to this day, I have a lot of trouble crying. Like, I can't get there emotionally. Not because I don't want to, but, I could have something massive happen and I can't cry. And, this last year, we had a student that was killed at our school.
Yeah.
And I was torn up. I had him in class. He said hi to me every day in the hallway. And as I saw it happen, and as the events of that were going down and I was processing what was going on, I couldn't bring myself to cry. I wanted to so bad.
Yeah. I
wanted that catharsis and then that brings you this like guilt. Like, why am I not crying?
Why am I not feeling enough for this? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's the understanding that there are going to be lingering effects on you is also part of that understanding the context of the situation. Crying is tough for me. Emotional depth really of any kind can be tough for me. I'm an inch deep and a mile wide on emotions.
Yeah.
I've got a million people I love and care about. And you know this because you're a hugger. I am not a hugger. And for the first 3 years of us knowing each other, it was like like we'd see each other at an event and you'd be like, oh, and I'd be like, yeah, because like I don't have that emotional depth to be genuinely like surprised or giddy or cry. I just am kind of like all the time.
Emotional depth for me has been something I've been working on a lot because of my transition, and it's hit me like a sack of bricks. I'm not gonna lie, because a lot of what I'm doing and experiencing is going to cause emotions. HRT is known for that, and damn, it does. And it's really hard to get used to that as someone who didn't cry. I went to more funerals than I could count as a kid. I'm pretty sure before the age of 12, went to like 20 plus. Mom's family is big. Mom knows everyone down to her fifth cousin, and I met all of them, and so I go to funerals constantly. And I was like 12. And what ended up happening is I just lost the ability to cry at death. I lost the ability to care about it. But since I've started working on myself again and seeing therapists, which, by the way, everyone should see a therapist, no matter if you think you are stable or not. Everyone should. They're just helpful. Side note.
And I think to that point that you just said, Cora, because that's so important, I want to highlight it. You said, and I'm still working on that. We are always going to be still working on it.
Oh, yeah.
There will never come a point as an LGBT person, as a person of color who's experienced, the challenges that come with society, as someone, as a woman, period, or even as someone who has a single parent, as someone who has to work two jobs.
Everyone has their own unique context.
No one knows what it's truly like to be in someone else's shoes, and those people will always be working on themselves if they're growing. And so,
yeah. And this also a context for especially LGBTQ people is like transition for me. Something I was always thinking about in my head as I was starting this is like, what is my end point? There really isn't one. It's just chasing things that make me happy and continuing that. Yes, there may be points where I'm happy with what I have, and I if I didn't change anything, I'll live with it. But like at a certain point, still, I need to still look at, hey, I'm doing this. I want to do more of this.
Yeah. If you ever think that you have finally like got to where you wanted to be, you aren't far enough.
Yeah.
Like it is always a journey and always growth. I'm very conscious recently of that emotional depth. I really want to do better at like not just having empathy, but showing empathy, because I do have it. I don't show it.
And the thing is, like, Dalton, I know you care about so many people, and I struggle with this too initially, is like showing others that I care about them in an authentic way that's not just like, oh man, that sucks. Shit. Is pretty hard.
Yeah. It's pretty much my response to like, damn, that's crazy. Like, that sucks. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
And
like, that really was.
Damn, that's crazy's deep. And like, I don't know what to say at this point.
Yeah, and it's important to know that, if I know my students are watching the stream and my players and stuff, like, we're all working on getting better and being better versions of ourselves. If someone, particularly someone that has had a challenge or has some sort of like trauma that they've gone through, which who doesn't, but like understand that they are trying and there will be shortcomings.
Yeah.
And teachers mess up, coaches mess up. They still are there for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so what the experience, I guess, to wrap it up, did for me was it gave me like a purpose finally.
Yeah.
And maybe it was the chip on my shoulder. Maybe it was, I'm going to prove to my mom I can be happy and successful. And that's what it was at first. And that's okay, because that's what I needed at first.
And it motivated you.
Yes, I needed that. Now it is not about my mom. And I feel like I'm in a healthier place because it is about who in my life can I make, who can have a better life because of the impact I made.
That's exactly how I view everything I do. Because you see me with my flock of students I talk to now. It's
oh yes, the Kennedy fan club.
They made the thread, not me. Because what I care about most is making others happy. And if I can help these students and help them find their place, help them find their motivation, help them find their passion, help them just be happy, that makes me happy. And
or even just give them a place to
feel comfortable.
Be.
Yeah,
like I didn't have that. I don't remember a gay teacher. I certainly was not open at home. I didn't have a real friend group that could be that. I couldn't just get in Discord and like, oh my God, the Capitals, there's baseline 10 people in one of those VCs at all times. And they have a community.
Yeah.
That's the legacy that we leave. I've said that I don't know why I've been saying this. I said this at NACAD, then I said this in another thing I just did. I keep saying this sentence, but our legacy is relationships. And
Yeah.
our context is what informs how we build and enable those relationships. We can win state titles all we want in Naperville North, but like what matters, I didn't even mean to spill the tea. I just had to do it. I had to throw turp out there.
You're fine, you're fine.
You winning is great. The competition is great. The learning about science is great. The actual job I do is great. It is not what kids will remember.
And I think that's
They will
what helped me
remember
as
the relationships.
what's helped me as a teacher is letting go of the idea that my kids don't know my content. But they barely know it at the time of the class. They forget it when they leave. And so this lesson I learned from my supervising teacher back in student teaching was students will remember nothing about you besides who you were.
Yeah,
And
they won't
how
remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel.
exactly. And that's why every day when I went into class and every day when I go to work and see my students now, it's all about what can I do for you? That's first thing out of my mouth anytime I meet someone. Anytime they have struggle, anytime they're going through something, what can I do for you? And it's not like trying to get some responsibility off of me. And that's what I'm trying to teach people. It's not me trying to ditch responsibility and say, I did one thing, cool, I'm out. It's more, I want to help you the best way that I can, but I'm not going to assume what that is.
Yeah, maybe I'm just getting old, but it definitely feels like I've got softer over the years in terms of, how to handle people. And I think that's why I think if you're a member of the LGBT community and you have someone in your life that is an older member, particularly of the same community as you, you should like reach out to them and ask them
elder
about their
gaze
experience.
means so much.
Yes, and on a random sidebar, if you don't know a lot about gay history or the movement, the LGBT movement, please read a book and watch the movie Milk and like do your history lessons.
Start looking at the Stonewall riots and just track around from there.
You got to know how you got here. That's the arc here. Where I finally found peace is knowing how I got to the point I was.
Yeah.
And so, in a larger sense, the TLDR of our talk tonight is shit happens, and what are you going to do with your shit?
Yeah.
And if you can make sure that you are being authentic, telling your truth, treating others well, you have a right to feel bad. You have a right to feel hurt. You have a right to be angry.
You have a right to have emotions in general.
Right. But what you do not have is a right to be unkind to somebody else because of those. And so people might be like, well, you do. I'm like, okay, well, you do. But you know what I'm saying? Like, once you have your baggage, what are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. I chose to become a teacher and to coach esports and to run tournaments and do everything I could within that sphere to make other people's lives better.
I don't know if you noticed this through education, but I noticed that I changed the person through teaching. Because, so this is context of me. I came into education as like, I started college like, oh, I like teaching, I like math, I'll just do teaching. But as I went through my teaching programs and in student teaching, I realized I'm not in it for the, oh, I like math, because I mean I do, but also because of the students. And the only teachers who make impacts like you and I have on students are the ones who are here for the students first.
Yep.
And that's still a fact, is care about others first, and it may change everything.
Well, I appreciate you letting me get a little extra time to kind of tell the whole story. You've not even heard the whole story before. And so I'm glad that I finally got to tell that and tell it to a larger audience, because I think that it's important, as I said earlier, to have visibility. Know that there are people out there who have shared experiences, and there are people out there who have different experiences. You can learn from all of them. Be kind to people, chase your joy. I'm lucky that I live in a place and work in a place that I feel emboldened to be myself. I know that a lot of kids see me as the gay teacher, and I'm here for that. And I know a lot of kids certainly haven't had a lot of gay teachers, let alone gay coaches in sports. And so I just want to try to be that beacon at all times and live my best life. And if for any reason my kids thought I was really nice tonight on this conversation, don't forget I still don't like you, but at least sometimes I'll be soft.
Well,
So there's
we're
that.
going to see Dalton again here in about 5-10 minutes for another
Yep.
panel. So he initially was planning this panel later. We wanted to give some more context and share more of a story. So we're going to do a panel with him and Artie and Ashley and Tori here in a bit. So we're going to cut to a quick break and come back to that. Thank you, Dalton.
Yep. See you guys soon.